Hello everyone and welcome to Paxton Road TV and number 2 in a series of A Walk Down White Hart Memory Lane. My name is Sean and I'm going to give you in this series I hope, a few insights into games that I attended at White Hart Lane, which I've been going to since the 20th of January 1968. Anyway, tonight I'm going to bring you back to the year 1984, in particular a game in May of that year, which was the second leg of the UEFA Cup in the final against Anderlecht. But before I talk about that, I suppose I should give some context. Tottenham qualified for the UEFA Cup by finishing 4th in the season before, 13 points behind the league winners Liverpool, but only 2 points off of second placed Watford. Yes, Watford. Watford had just been promoted and this was their first season in what was then the First Division. Remember, a season took place over 42 games. We'd had quite a contracted season at the end. We were finishing up playing a series of games every 2 days in May, including both legs of the final. So this is an insight into my visit to the final, the second leg in particular, but I suppose we should talk about the campaign. At that time I was working in a record shop, Our Price Records, if people remember that label, and I meant that I didn't really get to go to Saturday games as I was working. I did get to attend to quite a few of the UEFA Cup games. So our first round was against a team from the Irish Republic, Drogheda United, and we scraped through 14-0 over the 2 legs, winning 8-0 at home and just letting them off a little bit by winning 6-0 in the second leg in Ireland. And the reward for dispatching with Drogheda was a match against Feyenoord. Now, for those of us of my generation, that brought back memories of the 1974 final, where we played Feyenoord over 2 legs and lost. But in particular, the game is remembered for the violence that took place in the second leg in Rotterdam, where Tottenham fans were attacked and the so-called English disease was exported probably to Europe. Interestingly enough, Ajax sort of say that this was the fact that we took on Feyenoord, their hated rivals, kind of brought the two teams together. But that's another story for another time. So Feyenoord were a different proposition in 1983, and they contained in their number a certain Johan Cruyff, whose career was winding down, but still an exceptional player. And Cruyff was very keen on using the media to build it up as a Cruyff the master against Hoddle the apprentice. As you know, Glenn Hoddle was probably one of the greatest players to ever pull on our lily white shirt. And the result of this was that the first leg was played at home. So I was at the game, and Glenn Hoddle himself says it was probably the finest performance he ever gave in a Spurs shirt. He admitted that on a recent BT Sport documentary called Extra Time, which I saw recently and recommend to everyone who's a Spurs fan. We tore Feyenoord apart in the first 45 minutes. An absolutely incredible display. Hoddle made 4 goals in the first half alone as he toyed with the master, Cruyff. And we were 4-0 up at half time. Spurs being Spurs, I think it's important to say that we still managed to concede 2 goals in the second half, including one by Cruyff himself. And we only came out of it with a 4-2 lead. to go to Rotterdam a couple of weeks later. However, in Rotterdam, we were never really troubled. I don't know what happened off the field, but certainly on the field, we won 2-0. And so we progressed 6-2 against Feyenoord and possibly expunged the bad memories of 1974 at the same time. And our reward for beating Feyenoord was to get Bayern Munich in the next round. Bayern Munich have obviously historically always been a strong team. If you look down their squad, it had very famous players, German internationals, the best of foreign imports. So we travelled to Munich for the first leg, and we played reasonably well. However, we conceded a late Michael Rummenigge goal and lost the game 1-0. So we came back to Tottenham 2 weeks later, and we scored a very late goal ourselves. Thankfully, though, it was the second goal, a very late goal by Mark Falco, and we went through 2-1 on aggregate. So maybe when it came to the next round, UEFA thought, well, we'd had 2 hard ties, so they gave us Austria-Vienna. And again, we were drawn at home in the first leg. We won the first leg 2-0 comfortably enough, and then went to Vienna 2 weeks later and waltzed around to a 2-2 draw, going through 4-2. So this then led to a semi-final, and we were drawn against Hajduk Split of the then Yugoslavia, now of course in Croatia. The first leg was in Split and is remembered mainly for the pre-match invasion by one of their fans with a cockerel, obviously symbolising our own badge, which we wear proudly, and which he then duly strangled in the centre circle before the game started as a sign of intent. We took the lead in the first half, and then Spursily, we conceded 2 goals in 10 minutes in the second half and came away from Split with a 2-1 deficit. Thankfully, the second leg was at White Hart Lane, and that away goal that we'd scored in Croatia was to prove important, because we only won the second leg 1-0 with a goal by Mickey Hazard. But that meant that we had qualified for the final for a tournament that we'd won in 1972 when it was first created. And our finalists, our opponents in the final, were to be Anderlecht of Brussels. Anderlecht were the defending UEFA Cup holders. So, and if you look down their team, they were all full of current, or at that time, Belgian internationals. They also had some imports from other countries, most notably Morten Olsen, who was playing a libero role or sweeper role, which meant that he would be mopping up at the back but could easily turn up in attack. A very cultured player. Other players that played for Anderlecht at the time included Frank Arnesen, who was later to become our sporting director with the Santini Jol period before he took Roman Abramovich's dollars. But it was the first leg was to be played in Brussels, and tragically before the game there was an altercation in a bar, and a young Spurs fan was shot and killed. And I don't know whether this kind of clouded the atmosphere. I didn't travel overseas at that point, but we took a 1-0 lead from Paul Miller in the first half. And in the squad, which had been decimated by injuries through the season, we didn't have Hoddle by this time. Ray Clements was unavailable, and Steve Perryman was to receive a yellow card, which will bar him from the second leg. And young Tony Parks was in goal. And tragically for him, he spilled a shot quite close to the end, and Anderlecht equalised to make it 1-1 on the night. And so they travelled to London when we were in the midst of a fixture congestion pile-up, c'est la vie. And the second leg was on May the 23rd. And this is the programme here, as you can see, cost £1. And I remember unbelievably that this match was a match that you could pay cash on the door. You didn't need to have a ticket. So I was working in our price with a guy called Rick Saunders, whose girlfriend, I think at the time, was came from a Spurs family. So he was organising to see his possible brother-in-law, if you could call that. And he agreed to meet me at the game. So we met at the back of the Paxton Road. I think it must have been 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And what do guys do when they've got a few hours to kill? The local off licence was raided and drink was taken, as they would say in Ireland. Some people were quaffing it at incredible amounts. I was much more able to take a drink then. I would say I was quite merry by the time the gates opened. I was drinking, showing my support for my team, I was drinking Holston Pills, our then shirt sponsor. So the game was a little bit of a day, shall we say. But, you know, it became, a cutthroat kind of game. Lots of toing and froing. At half-time, it was 0-0. So we were still ahead on the away goal that we'd scored in Brussels. But on the hour mark, Olsen came forward and released their striker, Czernetowski. I don't know whether I pronounced that right. He was a Polish origin Belgian, international for the Belgian team. And he scored to put them 2-1 up on aggregate. And it was clear then that we faced a struggle just to maintain a grip in the game. Keith Birkinshaw, who was in the last game of his tenure, was forced to make several substitutions. Paul Miller was substituted by Ali Dick, the young Scot. Gary Mabbott, who was hobbling, was replaced by Osvaldo Ardiles, who came off the bench. And really, the last throw of the dice, these substitutions were made at in the 70th, 75th minute, and we were in danger of going out. Incredibly, we laid siege to the Anderlecht goal. And then in the 84th minute, the most incredibly broken down corner, where Ardiles managed to strike the bar from 3 yards out with his left foot. A ball came over and Graham Roberts chested the ball down and then barged his way through and managed to slip the ball over the goalkeeper to absolute bedlam on the terrace. And while we were jumping about, I was suddenly aware that there was someone lying on the terrace. And when I looked down, I saw someone who we'd been in the queue outside in Paxton Road, and obviously he'd been imbibing, who'd been asleep through the game. He was woken to the sound of Spurs fans like myself going absolutely mental that we tied the game with 6 minutes to go. And he was then stirred from his slumbers to see the rest of the game. Extra time was quite fraught. I think chances fell to both teams, but no one was able to apply the killer touch. And so we went to the dreaded penalties. And when the referee tossed the coin, it was decided that the penalties would be taken at the Paxton Road end. So I was behind the goal, slightly to the right, and up stepped Graham Roberts, who'd obviously got us to this point with his late equaliser in the 84th minute. He dispatched his penalty with real aplomb into the top corner, and then up stopped Morten Olsen. Morten Olsen struck his penalty, but Tony Parks parried it and saved it, which put us 1-0 up on the penalties. Then up stepped Hackney boy Mark Falco. He blasted his ball into the corner, 2-1. The next Anderlecht penalty was dispatched as well, so it was 2-1. Then Gary Stevens stepped up. He scored 3-1. Enzo Schiffer, a very talented Belgian international of Italian extraction, he took his penalty, 3-2. Steve Archibald, we took more care of you, Archibald, stepped up, scored his penalty. So 4-2. Upstem Verkalteren, he scored for them to make it 4-3. And then the last penalty, an up-step Danny Thomas, a great right back, a brilliant right back whose career was tragically cut short by injury. He stepped up, hit his penalty to the left, but the goalkeeper saved it. And I remember the ground, just there was a sharp intake of breath and a big sigh. But everyone saw the look on Danny Thomas's face, and Spurs fans showed their true colours that night by starting singing "There's Only One Danny Thomas," and as the rest of his teammates consoled him, I'll carry that memory forever. That Spurs fans really showed up for a man who hadn't let us down all season, but anyone can miss a penalty. So it was then left to Arnor Gudjonsson, father of Ida Gudjonsson, who was later to play for Spurs, to step up to take the penalties into sudden death. And it was at this time that Tony Parks redeemed himself from his error in the first leg and saved the penalty, then went on the most amazing lap of honour at 70 miles an hour, with his teammates struggling to catch up with him. And the whole terrace went bedlam round me. We couldn't believe it. It was such drama, so Tottenham, and we'd won the UEFA Cup for the second time. But I'll always remember two things from that night. The guy who was sleeping at my feet, unbeknownst to us, and given in the old days, terraces used to sway about, and there were these barriers. I think he'd managed to get under a barrier and was therefore, not too much disturbed. But I'll also remember the Spurs fans stepping up for Danny Thomas and showing the true nature of what to be a Spurs fan is. I lost touch with Rick. I don't know, hopefully he'll see this or someone will bring it to his attention, but it would be good to be in touch with him. He later found fame. He was a very good friend of the rock band Motorhead, and he became like an official or semi-official photographer, and you'll find his pictures on copies of their albums and I think even books. If you're out there, Rick, I hope you're doing well. I hope everyone enjoyed this little trip down White Hart memory lane. This is number 2 in an occasional series. If you like it, press a like, subscribe to the channel, become a member, but watch out for other stuff. We always have reactions and previews and lineup shows. We have Judge Jodie who does her markings on a Monday after games. And then there's always Ask Sid, where you can ask him for his opinion, or he will investigate something for you. And it's always a good laugh on that, usually on a Friday. But keep following the channel. keep checking us out, and smash a like. With that, I'll see you again, and the next time I do a walk down White Hart memory lane.